Hi, this is Andy with Mountain Computers. Today is February 28th, 2019. Today I want to talk about programming languages because several people have asked me over the past couple of years, what languages do I program in? Well, I've been on IT advisory boards with the local community colleges as well as the university and the school district, and I have told them what languages you should be focused on based on where the industry wants students to be when they graduate. So the one most important language I can tell you, regardless of what industry you're in, what company you work for, is SQL. It's got to be SQL. It's structured query language, SQL. You have to know SQL. That's a pretty simple language. There's only really 4 commands, and it deals with big data. Regardless of the data warehouse technology you use, you've got to know SQL. To manipulate, create, modify, delete data, remove it, databases and tables, indexes. That's it. Structured query language, SQL. Yeah. I want to call it stored query language, but it's not. It's structured query language. I started using SQL back in 92 or 93. Yeah. And the versions then were 89, 92. I think that's what it was. But even today, I use SQL about 2 to 3 hours a day. I've told the universities and the community colleges and all of them that SQL should be a course for everyone who goes to school, because no matter what industry you work in, what job you have, you will probably be working with data. And with data, if you know SQL, I mean inside and out. I mean, you don't need a powerful computer, you don't need a powerful anything. You just need to be able to have a SQL database and a simple client to read and write to it and do queries and just learn the basics. But SQL, that's the primary language that I want to emphasize to you. Now there's other languages, application languages, that are important. And the ones I use, and there's 2 schools of thoughts here. There's the LAMP stack, which is the Linux, Apache, what's M? Mariah database, and Python. I think it's Mariah, yeah. And then there's the .NET stack, which is the Microsoft stack. So you have the Linux stack, the open source stack, and then you have the Microsoft stack, the closed stack. Microsoft is starting to open up their stack a little bit more lately, so we'll get to see the best of both worlds come together here within the next decade or so. So when it comes down to the programming languages in both of those, I'm in the Microsoft stack, and I'm a little bit on the Linux stack. But what application development environments do I use? I'll use C#, that's over here, Microsoft stack. I will use Visual Basic Pro 6, and I use 6 Pro because I can actually compile a quick utility or a light application that can do just about anything, and I don't need the .NET stack installed to run it. I can just compile it, take the executable, and move it over to another computer without the .NET stack. However, the Visual Basic Runtime does have to be included somehow, and in most computers these days, it'll run. It will run. What else? SQL, language for me, Visual Basic, Visual Basic.NET, C#. I don't do C++ or C anymore. As far as the internet languages go, the internet languages are, first of all, HTML. I started on 3.2 and then 4. Those are the versions. There's now HTML5. Now CSS, cascading style sheets. JavaScript, I do JavaScript, a ton of JavaScript. Now, when it comes to languages that the industry and the world needs, it always needs SQL. No matter what people say, you gotta have SQL. JavaScript. Now over here there's another world called Java. Now that's for government agencies and academics and all these other people that need Java. And Java is very important, it's very fast, it cleans up after itself, it's very object-oriented. I mean, it goes pretty much everywhere. What other languages? Well, if we go back 40 years, I'll tell you it was Fortran 77 and COBOL. And that was just on the mainframe side. And on the PC side, when the PCs came around in the 80s, it was CP/M, a Microsoft product. It was, I was doing assembly, I was doing Pascal, and that was on the Apple platform, Apple II, Apple IIe, Apple II Plus. Fast forward into, so the 80s was that language, besides Unix, System 5. The PC market, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s. In the 90s, it was still SQL, C, C++. That was C6 and C7 from the Microsoft side. What other languages? So in the 90s, then the internet came around, and the HTML came out. JavaScript was very popular then too. CSS didn't come around until 2000s. CSS cascading style sheets. We had include files. Include files were always sort of there, but then cascading style sheets came along, CSS. Let's see, what else? What other languages? The community colleges, I've told them the top 3 languages. Oh, Python. Python is very powerful. I like Python. I've been using Python for a couple of years, but just hit or miss, just for some reporting, some data analysis stuff. Nothing major, not in production, just for my own projects and hobbies. But predominantly, if I was to give you advice about a programming language, I would say no matter what language you use, definitely make sure you're able to read and write to a database, do file I/O, understand. I mean, you'll get a book this thick, you know, in your course materials and classes in college, and you really only need about that much of that book. It sucks because books are expensive. Let's see what else. That's all I can think about. In a given day, I'm 3 to 4 hours inside some programming. And then I have my blog and vlog, like I am here, describing it and doing some knowledge sharing. What else? What other languages? I think that's about it. Oh, scripting. You got to know scripting, batch files. Hands down, if you're into any systems administration or even just backups, you got to know how to do batch files on Linux and in PCs. I mean, simply learning how to batch out a backup script, you know, to back up all of your images or files from this drive to that drive, internal or external, or a script that sends an email that says when the backup is done on a server, send this email to these people to let them know the backup succeeded or failed. 99% of the time it will say succeeded. That 1% that failed, that's where you have to really be on your toes. Other programming, I think that's about it. Let's talk about application programming for a second specifically. So when you write a program, there's a couple things that come to mind. 1, a setup program, and 2, privileges. What kind of privileges you need to run the program. Now if it's just calculator or notepad, just standard user privileges. But if you're doing any applications that are doing things to the system, you'll need to elevate your privileges to administrator. Now, in Windows, there's a trick, and you got to know the trick, and it's not documented very well. But in your executable program, when they compile it, they say add a manifest file to this in order to elevate your privileges. Well, you can get around the manifest file just by naming the executable something setup or setup something.exe. By having the name, it's not a setup program, it just needs to be treated as if it is a setup program. And by default, Windows will ask you to elevate the privileges, no matter what. Even if you are an admin, it will elevate the privileges of the program. So that's a trick. So with the Go Green PC Tune-Up, not only does our installer have the word setup in it, but our actual executable of the program has the word setup in it. So we elevate on install, and we also elevate when we go to complete the starting of the program and let it run. Because anything that runs outside the program, like a batch file or a command, it will already have admin privileges, so they'll just run anyhow. So that's cool. I think that's it for now. Learn a language, love it. It's all free now. You don't have to pay for it. So this is Andy from Mountain Computers. Be sure to like and subscribe and share, and have a good day, and there will be more to come. Thanks.